Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'm going to share my review of Delta Green: The Conspiracy from Arc Dream Publishing. It's written by Dennis Detwiller, Adam Scott Glancy, and John Scott Tynes, with artwork provided by Dennis Detwiller. The 226-page hardcover with PDF carries an MSRP of $49.99, or you can grab just the PDF alone over at DriveThruRPG for $19.99. Do want to mention, as I share this video, there is currently a fantastic bundle of holding which is offering Delta Green, including The Conspiracy. So it is going on for about another 9 days, and you can score tons of Delta Green gaming goodness for about $10 less than what you would pay for this physical book. So if you are missing some PDFs for Delta Green, or maybe you don't have The Conspiracy, or maybe you're just interested in checking out Delta Green for the first time, do yourself a favor, take a look at that bundle of holding. All right, all that said, let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got Delta Green: The Conspiracy. A few things I want to mention before I dive on in. First of all, my friends over at Arc Dream Publishing were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important for you to know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I want to give you a very good feel for what's inside The Conspiracy and share my thoughts about it too. Lastly, if you are a gamer and your game master is running Delta Green, or maybe they're thinking of running Delta Green, or maybe they're looking at picking up The Conspiracy so they can run Delta Green during the 1990s. Regardless, if you are a player, tune out now. Even though this is not an adventure book, this is a supplement, there are going to be spoilers, and there are going to be major spoilers, because I can't talk about Delta Green: The Conspiracy without getting into detail about what goes on behind the scenes in the world of Delta Green. So you don't want the surprises and scares ruined because you watched this review. Like I said, I recommend tune out now. Having said that, you can always tell your game master about this video, because if they're thinking of running Delta Green or picking up The Conspiracy, then they can actually approach that and make a far more informed buying decision. So let's jump on in. If you are not familiar with Delta Green, it is a role-playing game of conspiracy and the Cthulhu mythos. How I usually explain Delta Green to people is if you had an R-rated X-Files, far more gory, far more bizarre, far more dark than any season of the X-Files, then you'd have an idea of Delta Green. Strangely enough, a lot of people out there think Delta Green was inspired by the X-Files, when the reality is the first source book came out about a year before the X-Files premiered. Now, this is that source book remastered for modern Delta Green. So this actually takes place in the 1990s, late 1990s. That is the original setting of Delta Green. So you're going to get the history of Delta Green, a lot of discussion about the agents, many factions that both could help or hinder Delta Green, a lot of the enemies, the mythos entities as well. And this isn't a source book that's just loaded down with stat blocks, and it's not a bestiary or anything along those lines. This is more of the setting book, the source book. Now, we do have important NPCs, and we do get stat blocks for them, but this is taking a deep dive into the world of Delta Green during the late 1990s. So Delta Green is supposed to be an agency that was set up by the government. It is top secret, and it was in response to the discovery of the Deep Ones complex that was discovered and destroyed off the coast of Massachusetts. In fact, it was near the town of Innsmouth. Obviously, if you're familiar with the Shadow over Innsmouth, you know all about that. So, this was a government agency, and it was designed to protect the United States against Mythos incursions. And it expanded its role a bit since that point. Now, you're going to get a bunch of information about Delta Green and its agents, which are normally the majority are comprised of law enforcement agents who maybe they work for a police department or the FBI or ATF, DEA, possibly the CIA, CDC. So a lot of times your agents, your player characters are going to have some sort of tie to a governmental agency. Not always. There are player characters who are just civilians who just happen to have specific skill sets that are found to be useful by Delta Green. Of course, all the information as far as creating agents is located in the Agent's Handbook for Delta Green. We're also going to find out about the various different factions who might be allied with Delta Green, or they might hinder investigations by Delta Green, or maybe they're out and out antagonistic against Delta Green, or maybe they are true enemies of Delta Green. So we're going to get into a lot of information about that. And it's important to keep in mind, if you have Delta Green, the Agent's Handbook, as well as the Handler's Guide, that takes place nowadays. So there's a lot different in the 1990s world of Delta Green than there is in the 2020 world of Delta Green. And I gotta say, I really, really appreciate this source book. And it's been a long, long time since I read the original Delta Green. And I had it. I picked it up when it came out because I've been running Call of Cthulhu for over 40 years. But I didn't remember most of it. And of course, once again, this is remastered, so it's not just word for word, verbatim, the original source book. But I forgot how really twisted even just the 1990s version of Delta Green's world really is. So at this point in time, our big bads are actually the Mi-Go. And I love that because the Mi-Go are actually my all-time favorite mythos entities, or mythos species, I guess we'll say, because they're so bizarre, they're so weird, they're so unlike humans, and their thought process is truly alien. And in fact, there's some role-playing advice in the book talking about the Mi-Go for game masters to look at a situation, think of what is the most obvious approach, and do something radically different than that. And then you'll get a better feel for the Mi-Go. So we also have other factions, as I mentioned. So we've got Majestic, which is another government agency. And they are still active because you see, in the 1990s, Delta Green really doesn't exist anymore. Or does it? Because it was shut down and defunded in 1970 following a catastrophic mission in Cambodia. I'm not getting into all the details about it, but the government pulled the plug. So now Delta Green is off the books and it's a rogue agency. And I love the fact at this point in time, the vast majority of Delta Green agents don't know that. They think this is still a government agency. And it's so cool to think that, well, you know, these law enforcement agents are breaking the law, seriously breaking the law. So I do dig that quite a lot. Now, Majestic is an agency that was set up in response to the Roswell crash because It was real. It was a UFO. There were 4 aliens, and 3 of them were deceased. One was still alive. And then Majestic was set up to study various aspects of the ship and its propulsion system and the dead aliens and interrogating the live alien. So we have all these divisions of Majestic, which have their own agendas. And as far as the aliens, they're those traditional grays. Yes, those little bug eyed aliens that we see in movies and TV shows. That's who we have as far as our aliens that Majestic deals with. It turns out eventually in the early 1980s, Majestic comes to an agreement with the Greys. And it's an accord that they reach where the Greys will continue to abduct humans, do experiments on humans as long as the humans are returned unharmed. And the government will continue to cover up UFO sightings and things like that in return for technology and detailed intel on the United States enemies and allies. And it turns out it's actually not a really good deal because the aliens aren't holding up their end of the bargain. But here we go. Major spoiler. The aliens aren't real. The aliens are actually biological constructs of the MeGo that they're using to manipulate the United States government. How awesome is that? But those aren't our only factions that we have to worry about. We also have the Karatechia, and they happen to be Nazis who are looking to bring to rise a Fourth Reich through the occult. So they're making deals with mythos entities, not the MeGo. So that's another enemy that Delta Green has to concern themselves with. We also have Saucer Watch, which is a group of well-financed ufologists. One of the aspects that I think is very cool about Delta Green and the conspiracy is that your version of the world of Delta Green could be radically different than my version of the world of Delta Green. And you may have factions who are much bigger players or much more important in your Delta Green than in my Delta Green. So you could have Saucer Watch be allies to the agents of Delta Green, or they could just get in the way all the time when the agents are investigating something UFO related, or they could be enemies. We also have the Fate, which is a group of individuals who are essentially just looking to accumulate power, great global power. And it's rumored that it might be led by an avatar of Nyarlathotep. And it is a criminal organization as well. The mafia is actually afraid of Fate, the network. So that's another of the factions you can have and throw out there too. So there's a lot going on and a lot of opportunity for the game master to craft their own game world. Nothing is set in stone. There are just a variety of possibilities with Delta Green, the conspiracy. We wrap up with some appendices. This is where we start getting into more detail about the 1990s, what it would have been like as far as being a law enforcement agency or working for the CIA, CDC. We get information about firearms technology, get a glossary of various different organizations and procedures. And then we wrap up with some interesting little additional touches here. Now, these aren't full-fledged adventures, but they can provide with some really good adventure themes or nuggets for you to mine to create Delta Green Adventures. So just showing off quite a bit of this. We get some new tomes as well, some new Mythos tomes to utilize. And that is The Conspiracy for Delta Green. Now let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts and give Delta Green, The Conspiracy, a review score. I really dig Delta Green. Always have. I remember picking up the original source book. I don't remember the exact details because I really didn't run Modern Adventures, but I would always be picking up stuff for Call of Cthulhu, even if I knew I would not be running it. Of course, I'm a huge fan of the Lovecraft stories. I've been running Call of Cthulhu for over 40 years, although my preferred playground is the classic 1920s and 1930s. And that's where I feel that Delta Green has a place if you're looking to tackle modern Cthulhu Mythos horror role playing. Because it's possible Delta Green could be the perfect horror role playing game for our time, because so much of it is enmeshed in conspiracies and government cover ups and conspiracy theories and people obscuring the truth and others believing that they are the only ones with access to the real truth. And Delta Green plays on that really, really well. Delta Green adventures tend to be far more grisly and dark and bizarre than your average Call of Cthulhu adventures. And that may not be everybody's cup of tea, because some Delta Green adventures are a little much, in my opinion. Not all of them, but there are some that I probably wouldn't run just because they're too freaky. But The Conspiracy is the original source material remastered for modern Delta Green. And if you are looking to run a classic 1990s Delta Green sort of campaign, this is fantastic. But guess what? You don't need to be looking at running a 1990s campaign, because there is plenty of content in here that would work perfectly well with a 2020s Delta Green campaign. This book is excellent. And one of the things I really appreciate about it is it allows you to create your own world for Delta Green. So, which faction is going to play the biggest part in your adventures? Is it going to be Majestic? Is it the Fate? Is it the Migo? It's all up to you. And the relationships that Delta Green has with some of these factions are also completely up to you. And I love that. There's plenty of advice and gameable content in here. That said, it's not loaded with stat blocks and monsters, but there is plenty of material in here to utilize in your own Delta Green campaigns. And it is presented fantastically, and there is plenty in this book to get your creative juices going as a game master. On a scale of 0 to 10, I give Delta Green, The Conspiracy, a 10 out of 10. It is that good. Once again, the 226-page hardcover with PDF carries an MSRP of $49.99. You can grab the PDF over at DriveThruRPG for $19.99. And for approximately the next 9 days, you can take advantage of a fantastic bundle of holding featuring Delta Green and Delta Green, The Conspiracy. So don't miss out on that. All right, that is it for this time out. If you liked the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks and reviews at tabletop games. Of course, when you're not watching videos here on the YouTube channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more that you aren't going to find here on the YouTube channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And until I see you next time, here's hoping all of you out there get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.